can't see them. They're not very big. And once the satellites can't see them, how can we negotiate? They have no idea where they are or where they're going to be. So eventually, in staying focused and keeping at it and trying to be faithful and plugging along, we get around that stuff, I think.
Elizabeth?
It's important to keep in mind what you also said earlier, that the fact that we're a women's encampment, and the fact and the issues of women's freedom that we believe in aren't side issues. They're very connected to our right to be free as women is very connected to our right to live as human beings, and that we see that also is connected to the necessity of being tolerant towards lesbians, towards women with other lifestyles, so that those three issues are real connected. Our right to live as human beings, our right to be free as women, and our right to, and the necessity of tolerating different things. So they're not, in a way, it's really true that they're not side issues. They're all one. And maybe the media is not so far off in seeing them as connected.
Just a sentence on the fact that because this is a different issue and being approached in a different way by all women, it has laid it upon the press and other people who aren't here to think in new ways, to accept this new situation. And because of that, it is relevant to ask, why doesn't the press or the community ever ask questions about the way in which the men in the military just down the road here in their barracks wander around naked when they're all men together? Why don't we any longer ask questions about homosexuality in the military? That was an issue 6, 8, 10 years ago, but now it's readily accepted. So that issue has died down. And then, one needs to ask these kinds of questions.
And also to ask why it is that townspeople are not disturbed about public displays of affection, as they're called, PDA, between men and women. Townspeople.
Just have one more quick thing on that. I think we may be belaboring this a little, but just that I think the best way we can deal with that is by making contacts with people who live in the area, which is like why we want people like yourselves to be here today, and for you people to be dealing with your neighbors and friends and having us maybe give talks in your houses or whatever by contacting as individuals. That's the best way I think we can get beyond that.
I'd like to ask if there are any questions.
This issue of the Pershing and the crews is not to be confused with unilateral disarmament, is it? I mean, a lot of people, I think, are afraid that this group stands for getting rid of, the United States getting rid of all their missiles, and then that would leave Russia with the upper hand. And that's not the issue here, is it? Although it's the misconception.
No, I don't believe that is an issue here. There are people here who do believe in unilateral disarmament. There are other people here who say, I don't want to trust the Russians, but by the same token, I don't understand why the Russians would trust us. So if we can verify by satellite, we've got something we can work with if we're not trusting each other. The encampment in no way supports a statement of unilateral disarmament, though some you will talk to will say, I'm willing to put it down, in the hopes that there will be a globe. I'd just like to ask if there are other questions about the cruise and the Pershing, because some people have said to me, I really didn't even know that stuff. I don't even know what the arguments are. Do you feel like you know enough now that when you go for coffee with your neighbors that you can talk about what the cruise and the Pershing are about? If you have some questions about it, there are a number of us who can answer that.
Yeah, what can those missiles do? I mean, if they were to hit a piece of land, how much would they destroy?
Okay. Well, the question is, what can the missiles do? How much land? What kind of destruction would they do? Does someone want to answer that?
Just a real quick
numerical
thing. One cruise missile carries 100 warheads. Each warhead is 15 times the Hiroshima bomb. So that's sort of a basic for a cruise missile.
And how many are being deployed? 5?
There are 464 that are slated to go to Europe.
Each cruise missile carries 100 warheads. Each warhead is 15 times the Hiroshima bomb. And what about the Pershing missile, what does that do? The numbers.
The Pershing missile is scary because of one thing primarily. It flies almost at the speed of sound. It's so fast that once they're in place, the Russians might see something coming. They might have a computer chip that's melted. There might be a flock of geese in the air or whatever. But once they see that coming their way, they're going to go to a launch-on warning system. So in other words, we haven't got time to negotiate. Before, we could pick up the phones and talk to each other. And now, as we've gotten our technology more and more advanced, that gap is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. And even if we didn't mean to be in war, we're getting so close that our accidents are probably going to do it for us.
And one other question, what about the MX missile? And why is that not being focused upon as much as the Pershing and cruise?
Anybody want to field a question on the MX? Nobody wants to field?
Yes.
I think it is being focused upon just as much, but in other parts of the country. The relevant thing here in Romulus is the cruise missile and the Pershing, because there is this particular connection with this depot and with the link with all the testing. All the weapons are linked with here and New York State. The MX missile at present has for months, if not years, has provoked enough discussion for our legislators to invent 36 different ways for delivering the MX missile. And the latest idea of presenting it has won the limited favor of Congress and the Senate. It is much discussed, let's say almost every 3 or 4 days. Some mention about it is made in a New York Times editorial. But here, this is where we can really emphasize cruise missiles and Pershings. Another thing is that cruise missiles and Pershings are to be deployed this December in Europe. MX missiles are way down the road or down the racetrack, whichever you like to think. But the cruise missile and the Pershing are to be deployed this December. And once that happens, because the cruise missile is unverifiable, it's too small for many monitors, then we're in a hell of a bigger mess. It's very important to act now on these two issues.
You hinted on something just a minute ago that I'd like you to go back to. If these are deployed, how long will it take them to reach their target? Number two, how long would it take the United States with clearly superior computer technology to detect that if it was a computer failure or a flock of geese, how long exactly would it take us to detect that? How long has it taken us in the past?
It has in the past taken us up to 6 minutes to detect an error.
How long would it take those to detect?
It takes from 4 to 8 minutes, depending on what part of Russia you're talking about.
A flock of geese go by, World War III is 2 minutes down the road before they can say it is.
Launch on warning.
That's right.
We are, by the
This is
way,
where the danger is.
selling our technology to the Russians so that they can use our computer knowledge so they can do it faster.
Well, that's safer because their computer is not as good as ours.
That's right.
And ours have made many mistakes down the line that we don't even know about.
Right, they've made a lot of mistakes and we've made a lot of mistakes. The only problem is that the margin of error is shrunk in terms of our time that we can respond, and that's very frightening.
We've also made a lot of mistakes. Cruise and Pershing missiles, as they're being tested, aren't even passing their test at a 50% rate. So they are very dangerous because if something goes wrong, they're going to hit the wrong target.
Question. You mean that thing right over there has 100 warheads, each of which... No. I mean, is that the size you're talking about?
It's a replica. Actually,
I know it's a replica, but I mean, that thing contains, or could contain, something that has 100 warheads, each of which has the power you're talking about?
No.
Is it? I'm sorry.
Right. I think that the figure that I remember, at least, is that it will hold 3 warheads, but the other thing is accurate, that it is, in fact, 15 times. It can be up to 15 times the power of Hiroshima. Hiroshima wiped out 140,000 people in a second. Multiply that times 15. You've got one cruise missile. Multiply that by 464, and you've got Europe. And that's just ground-launched cruises. We can also launch them from the air. We can launch them from the sea. We can launch them from underneath the sea. And so there's also demonstrations and work being done against Trident out in Seattle area, because they're also equipped with missiles, and one submarine can wipe out every major city in Russia that has a population of 10,000 people or more. One submarine. How many submarines are we supposed to have in Trident? I can't remember. What was that?
30, I think. They planned for 50.
Planned for 50. Well, they've only planned for 8,000 cruise missiles, folks. 8,000. It's going to take a few years, but that's what they're planning on. That's the unthinkable. Somebody said to me this morning, what you're doing out there is you're creating mass hysteria. You ought to stop it. I said, all I can say is I have been a hospice chaplain. I've worked with people who have cancer, okay? And they get the word and they deny it and they do all of the things that they want to do, and then someday they say, Jan, I want to talk to you because you know what? I think I've got it, the big C. And I respond to them and we deal with their despair and we cry and we fall apart, and the whole world, their world, immediate world, falls apart, and you have all kinds of problems. But those people are the ones that seem most ready to deal with their death, who are the most effective in dealing with family problems and knitting things together and being prepared to leave. I think facing despair is the only way to do it. When you feel it, but then we can do something else. Don't deny it. Denying it is, if it's going to happen, it'll happen anyway, regardless of what I do. If it does happen, it's going to happen in Western Europe. It's not going to happen here. Or people who are brighter than I am and who know more will obviously make sure that this planet is here. All I can say is the famous Minnesota line of wrong chicken lips, you know? Come on, folks.